You've also talked about electoral reform.
Yes, absolutely.
You were among probably the first to come out and identify it as a potential leadership campaign issue. I know that you've made a pledge to consult,
Right.
Potentially through a referendum.
That's right.
I'm just wondering, though. I mean, you come from BC,
That's right.
where there was a referendum,
Yeah.
and so I'm just wondering. There's a lot of people who support electoral reform who believe that a referendum is pretty much a way of killing it. Because it becomes a very difficult issue to embrace.
Sure, because you have to explain the new system, and people are sometimes, even though they know the current thing we're living under doesn't really work, they may be a little reticent to go to something new. You got to bring up concrete examples. Near 500 people are going to lose their jobs in this town under the Canadian Wheat Board because the government decided with less than 40% of the vote. It gave them a mandate to do what they want, even against the interests of farmers. I mean, you know this issue much better than most. So Canadians look at that and say, well, how is that possible? How could less than a quarter of voting age Canadians have voted for this government, and yet they're able to do these things that are even against the law in some cases because there was no plebiscite for the Wheat Board? It seems to me that if you go to the idea, the principle is that when you walk into the ballot box, there should be a decent chance that your vote is going to build the kind of government that you hope for. Mm-hmm. Let's connect those two things, the vote manifesting itself in a government. There's no perfect system. Mm-hmm. We in BC took on a system I thought was a terrible option. And even then, almost 60% of British Columbians voted for it. So I think there's an appetite. I think you just got to make it dead simple clear for Canadians. This is what you'll get with this system. Staying with the old one means things like we're seeing right now, an abuse of power, and just go from there. I've also talked about changing the way parties organize and having a more cooperation between parties like myself, the Liberal and Greens, which is also a bit of a counter-narrative to what we normally see from leadership candidates.
Well, at some point or another, what I find is just about everybody talks about bipartisan or multilateral cooperation in the
doing politics differently.
Doing politics differently, but almost no one seems to practice it at the end of the day. And with no disrespect to the MP from Winnipeg Centre, sometimes the NDP has had people that have thrown just as much fuel on the fire as members of the other parties. So, how do we break through the hyper-partisanism and really come through on the other side with something different?
You can't say it. You got to do it.
Yeah.
Right. What I get frustrated because I came from a less political background than some of my colleagues. I came from business and a nonprofit and worked in South America and Africa for a while. My orientation is a very pragmatic orientation.
Right.
Politics can be a wondrous thing that gets a whole bunch of things done, or it can be typically poisonous, partisan, and ineffectual. So I've talked about concretely putting this thing into action. Mm-hmm. If you want to say we need a less partisan parliament, then build it. Mm-hmm. Then start to create systems in which the parties are talking to one another as people and actually representing the people who voted for us as opposed to just our own self-interest as a party.
I take it in a majority parliament, though, without the cooperation of the government, it's a bit of a dead issue.
Oh, in terms of, no, it would have to manifest in a future NDP government, right? No, I think parties are loath to change the system that got them into power. Right? So if this, even if the system's broken, but it was broken, worked for you, you're going to keep it. If someone offers up something where you may have to share power, which a lot of the electoral reform that I see means that parties have to work together, they have to do things together. I think those are very active and engaging legislatures and good ones.
I know this is pretty hypothetical, but from an opposition perspective in a majority parliament, isn't it partly incumbent on you, though, over the next 4 years to find things you can support in what the government is doing? Isn't that part of the way of signaling what's going,
That's the politics I know, right? Some of my proudest moments as a parliamentarian is when we got something done, which required, always, the help of somebody else. And that means also being comfortable with sharing some credit, which for politicians isn't necessarily easy to do, but I'm comfortable with it. We need it. There's an urgency for me right now.
We have, of our viewers online, we have a question that's come through Twitter, and Lindsay... Okay, all right. I'm going to repeat the question.
Sure.
User Jack's Act 2, there's a disconnect between federal, provincial NDP, example Bill C-10, tuition. How can you work with the provincial NDP to build up the party?
Okay, so the question is focused on the sometimes disparity between federal and NDP and provincial NDP policies. They mentioned Bill C-10 in particular. First of all, explain some of the background of C-10 for those people watching, and the dilemma that it creates for a party like the NDP.
Yeah, for me it doesn't feel like much of a dilemma, but I hear it. There's going to be aspects of what one level of government does that appeals to some of our parties provincially and not others, and that's a tricky dance sometimes. Right. Frankly, the gun registry was a big one, right? We saw that with NDP governments here in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and other places, not so keen on it, even though our federal party was much more supportive. That happens. I think we have to respect one another and say that we're not some sort of monoculture. That the NDP at various levels, we have civic councillors and mayors across the country who are New Democrats but have a different take on certain issues. I think what happens though is the overlap of partisanship is what wrecks a lot of this. That the voting, if you look at members of parliament and their tendency to vote with their parties, it's upwards of 95, 97%. I mean, you don't get those numbers under Saddam Hussein. Like, what's going on? I know we're often in agreement with our parties, but I never saw it as a weakness when I had a disagreement with my party that wasn't a fundamental issue, right? A foundational issue, to vote another way. I don't see that as weakness. And Jack and I talked about that a lot, and we had good conversations, if I can say about it.
Disagreement short of potentially going and joining another political party. It's an unusual event, not unprecedented, of course, to have a member of one party walk the floor to another party.
Right.
But it does make people wonder about the federal party's hold on its Quebec caucus.
Yeah.
And we know the background of that, how quickly all those people were thrown together, many of them not expecting to be elected. Is this an indication of a bigger problem in Quebec, or is this a one-off?
My feeling is that it's a one-off, and the reason that's beyond just hope is that this particular member in leaving said she was attracted to the social program offered by the Liberal Party. Well, everybody knows that the best social program and plan in Parliament, and Liberals will say the same thing, is the one that we uphold. Her constituents are properly upset. Right? And her coarseness in what she said in her interviews afterwards about the passing of Jack struck me that the Liberals now have within their ranks somebody who's got a different sense of the world than I do. Right. And if that's how she views things, then good riddance. But it's disappointing to me, but I don't know this person well, and I'm confused why it's terrible timing and not very smart. Right. Is it signs of things to come? No, I've been thrilled with our Quebec caucus. This MP I didn't know at all. She hadn't said much. She's not running again. Like, there's a lot of things in this that are completely confusing. And you could see Bob Ray's face even in the press conference, that the more she talked, the less he wanted to be there. If I could read body language. One might
wonder what was going through his mind. I think we have another question via Twitter.
One more here. I'm just going to read it direct. Could a two-party system brought about through a merger with the Liberals affect partisanship in a positive way?
So the question is envisioning a potential two-party federal system, which implies a merger between the Liberals and the NDP, whether the merger itself would be a step towards an end of hyper-partisanism.
We need to end hyper-partisanism. I don't think that would do it. I think a two-party state is not necessarily a healthy thing. I think we should be careful what we wish for. You look south of the border. That's the most clear example. And there's sometimes where voters feel like they're choosing between dumb and dumber, right? That the third party, the fourth party often add a different element into the conversation. That doesn't make it so easy for the parties, both of them, to concede to certain powers in society that have a lot of sway, be that the big business community or any of those other things. It may sound strange, but even if in our position now of great strength, I don't envision a blue and orange map and be happy with it. I think the diversity of views is one of the things that makes us stronger as a country, but I think we can cooperate. I think we can, and we do. That's been a part of our party's history, NDP and Jack and all the rest.
So we don't need a merger under the current declining voter turnout and the way the electoral map is unfolding. We don't need a horse race between two parties to really loosen the grip the Conservatives have on power.
I have a common interest with the person who wrote in that we need to do something about that. My focus right now on the 40% of Canadians who don't vote, because they're predominantly younger Canadians, I was just at the university here, is to find ways to make us more relevant in their lives. I'm not sure that merger or non-merger answers that question. I think being less partisan helps.
Yeah. Just going to check. No. So I think we're good.
Awesome.
Yeah,
That was
absolutely.
a real pleasure, Dan.
Thank you very much for stopping by.
Yeah.
How long are you in Winnipeg?
Till tomorrow. I've been here a couple days now, and I'll be back.
Okay.
We're going to have a great big debate here as
Apparently
well.
you brought some cold weather from the West Coast.
No. Are you kidding me? We were in shorts when I was in BC a few days ago. I was in shorts yesterday
It was
here
a
in
bad
Winnipeg.
day to bring it up, I think. Yeah. So
Man, it's gone
thanks
to
very
Winnipeg
much
again.
and best of luck.
My pleasure. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.